here's the thing. For everybody listening, don't make the same mistake the Bengals just did in any facet of your life.
People are going to get hurt. It's the hockey season.
What about the Jared Cook play on the sideline?
I was very tempted to just put defense.
I'm saying it right now. If Anthony Davis is out for the playoffs, they don't make it out of the first round.
Come on, Austin and I have been saying this ever since Joe Burrow got injured.
I don't really think the Dodgers are going to make the World Series this year. I feel like they'll make it to the NLCS.
The Fernando Tatis extension, because that really surprised me.
Like you said, Ovechkin, he's getting older. He hasn't been playing as well as I imagined. He's one of the greatest goal scorers of all time, but he hasn't started off this season as hot as I would hope.
Hi, I'm Jeff Allen, and you're listening to Outsiders Opinions with Kevin and Austin.
What's up, y'all? Welcome to our USFL Opinions of the Week. We're going to just talk about, was the USFL a success in its first season? We're not going to do playoff review, our playoff predictions, because we literally got nothing right. So we acknowledged it. We didn't do well. Maybe we'll check out the season predictions another time. But right now, the big news is when you search up USFL news on Google, Fox News, Raiders sign USFL star Isaiah Zuber. Raiders signed former USFL cornerback Ike Brown. NFL signings from the USFL tracker. Commanders add a bunch of USFL people. So it looks like a lot of the USFL stars are getting signed by NFL teams. So I guess that's a success, like talent-wise, but now it presents a problem for the USFL, in my opinion. But you had a question for me, Austin?
Yes. Do you think it's the best move for the USFL to try to team up with the NFL and be a minor league system for them?
I would say no, because then they would be competing with the XFL, because I'm pretty sure the XFL already has a deal with the NFL to be similar to like a minor league team, because they're going to test out rules. So I would say with the USFL, you could try to do that, but I don't think you'd make a lot of money because you'd basically merge with the XFL.
I hear you. Maybe the USFL is for the NFC and the XFL is for the AFC or something to that nature.
That is true. I think the USFL, though, could just be a spring league, which is what they were, because I don't think I said USFL is going to should stay a spring league, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I wasn't sure if I said XFL. But I think the USFL spring league, I think even with players getting signed, this is their off season. So this kind of be like their free agency period, or just kind of like the period where nothing happens. And then once all these cuts happen, that's when your off season starts. And then you get a bunch of players, and then you start your league in the spring. So then you're not dealing with losing players left and right, like I just read with the USFL news. Do you think that would work or no?
It could work. There's still a lot to be figured out because they tested a lot of stuff, especially with different rules. They tested out going for it for an onside kick instead of just kicking an onside kick. They had to like play for it. They tried it a lot. I'm interested to see if they try out any new rules. Do you think they're going to try out some more new stuff next year that they didn't do this year?
I don't think it's going to be a bunch, maybe like one or two new rules, if that. Like, I think it was so new because they were a new league. Now I think they've kind of gotten their style. They've figured out how to do with rules, because I believe it's the guy on Fox, I'm pretty sure. The former ref that he reviews everything.
Is it Mike Pereira?
Yeah, Mike Pereira. That's what I was thinking of. So I think they have it down to now where they can try to repeat their success and maybe grow, by like going to the stadiums in each town or figuring out deals. So maybe that's what they should be working on now.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of questions I have about parity. I made that very evident during our previous videos. And one issue is, what if you're really good and then basically your entire starting lineup gets signed to the NFL? Like, Now you have the last pick in the draft, in the USFL draft, plus all your good players left for the NFL. How's that going to work out? What's your answer to those questions? Like, how would how should that be fixed? Where you're a really good team, you win the championship, maybe you go undefeated, win the championship, a lot of players performing really well, dominating the league, and then you lose all of your players because they go to the NFL. Maybe not all, but your significant players, the players who were the difference between winning and losing.
So, with that hypothetical situation, wouldn't there be a new number one team in the USFL? So there's not a constant team winning at the number one level,
True, I
correct?
could see that, but if you lose your quarterback and your best defensive player, now you're just a bad team. Like you don't be I understand that yes, there will be parity in the fact that there won't be a dynasty, but I don't think there'll be a parity in the crop of teams per season. Looking at just isolating one season, well, this team's terrible. Why was that team terrible? Because the year before they were really, really good and they lost all their good players.
Yeah, I
And
see
now
what
they
you're
have to
saying.
get players who have to learn the system all over again. While one team who was middling one year, the next year could be really good because they kept all their players and they wouldn't have to learn a whole new system and they gained chemistry and the coaches gained chemistry with the players and they understand their playbook and all that other stuff.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I would say like that would stink, but then it would kind of be like a rotating cycle where I think there could be a dynasty because maybe a team gets good at finding players each year and developing them. So, um, developing them, you'll just be good at development. Like to make a sports comparison, like the Rays just constantly bring up new guys and they're hitting well and doing well. So maybe one team figures out how to do it, how to develop them, so where they can sustain losses. And maybe sometimes some teams may just keep their players, and the players may go, "I don't want to play for the NFL." I know that's probably a minority group of people, but if that were to happen, but I think it would stink, and like you'd lose talented players, but I think you would still get better you'd get new teams winning, so each fan base would be happy and then sad. It sort of equal out in that hypothetical situation. But so that's my answer to your question.
Yeah, I see your point. But like you said, there's probably a very small amount of people who would choose to be in the the USFL versus the NFL. That's true with the XFL too. There's very few people who would choose the XFL over the NFL too, because the NFL, not only money wise, but also name recognition wise, you're playing for teams that are historically great. Like I guess if live in New Orleans, you'd want to play for the Saints. You wouldn't want to play for the Breakers. Like if you had a choice, you know what I mean? I guess it
Well, yeah.
could work with Birmingham because if you're like from Birmingham, hey, I want to play in Birmingham, or maybe a really old NFL player is like, hey, I'm still good, I can still compete, but I want to go back to my hometown that doesn't have an NFL team. But Tampa has an NFL team, and Michigan has an NFL team, and Pittsburgh has an NFL team. New Jersey has two NFL teams because they're technically in New Jersey. Like
So
the
yeah,
Giants are in, and the Giants and the Jets.
I have a question. So what you're talking about with the NFL team, it's almost like legacy of like the NFL versus
Yes.
um okay.
Like
That's I'm gonna
if
make
you
another.
would you rather go 0-17 in the NFL or 10-0 in the USFL? If I asked players that, they would probably say 0-17 in the NFL
Yeah,
because they're
because you get
playing
it.
in the NFL.
So now I know I'm not very familiar with golf, but this is a conversation I've been hearing a lot lately. Are you familiar with the Live Tour?
Yeah.
Oh, well, yeah, that wouldn't make sense, but it's basically a lot of golfers are leaving PGA because they're making more money with the Live Tour, and a lot of people are complaining because you won't have legacy of the PGA. So that's why I asked about legacy because maybe some guys just maybe want to start a legacy in the USFL, or maybe another thought that came into my mind is when drafting, where are they going to do a similar draft this year to what they did beginning? I
Well,
would
it couldn't
almost
be
say
a
no.
similar draft because last time they basically drafted or not even basically, they drafted entire teams. But I would assume it'd be like a 7 round draft, just like the NFL, just with 8 picks per round instead of 32.
Yeah. So my question is, where would they get those players? Do they go like 1 year in college? What do you got?
I have a thing that could fix, not fix, but help with the NFL problem
Yeah.
and losing in NFL. So maybe they have the first round, but after the first round ends, you have a compensatory round where every player that leaves your team, you get a pick in that round.
Or and maybe like alternate it. So then if a team loses like 5 guys, they don't get like the.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
I
not
get that. I
points as
get that. You
technical.
could still make it to where teams go in relative order, but if a team loses 11, the other team loses 8, there's
That
19
would be a
picks.
good. I think that's a good way to deal with the NFL problem. I also thought if they're drafting players, maybe they get a 2 year contract where they can't go to the NFL.
Yeah, but then I don't know how many people sign that contract because if the
I know
NFL calls and you can't, that may be your one chance.
that's true.
And I don't think many players want to risk losing that one chance for playing another guaranteed year in the USFL or even for that matter the XFL like I mentioned before.
Yeah, so that's one thing. But overall, I think it was a success. Like I think you had a solid season. I believe that the people owning the USFL hope it like begins to grow large, but it's gonna take a while. Like it took the NFL probably 5 or 10 years to get big, and then gather so much attention. What did you have to say?
I'm going to ask you this question. I'll respond after you answer. What was the biggest success for the USFL this season? What either storyline, event, game, stat was the biggest success this season for the USFL as an organization or as a football league?
I, I think I'm gonna do a cop out, but I'm gonna say finishing the season and getting and making a championship, and you have a champion. So I know it's hard, but like the AFL, no, that wasn't
No,
the
AAF.
AAF didn't even make it. Like, and all the teams in the USFL made it. So I think that to me is very successful. So that's my answer to your question.
It's a little bit of a cop out, but it's a good answer. It's a good answer. Mine would probably be that the championship wasn't it like the season wasn't dominated by one team. I know the team that won it went 10 and or 11-1 if you include playoffs, but the game was really close and the team that made it went 6-4 in the regular season, the other team went 9-1. So it wasn't like one team was like both sides. It both 9-1 teams made it. I feel like that'd have been a hindrance to the league because it's like, oh, the two dominating teams made it, but it showed a little bit of parity, the fact that the Philadelphia Stars made it. And I think another thing is that they didn't have any issues uh, with guys getting at the very beginning. You remember the one guy got cut for
Oh
not
yeah,
winning
the
for
he
winning pizza
brought
instead
pizza.
of yeah.
Yeah,
There
instead
wasn't
of
any other storylines like that. That didn't continue. I feel like that's a success that after that happened, there was no other stories in the USFL that took away from the season. There wasn't a scandal. There wasn't anything that happened. And we hear NFL scandals all the time. For example, the Miles Bridges in the NBA scandal right now that's going on right now. That well, what happened? What's going to happen to his career? Is it true? Is it not true? But there was none of that in the USFL once the season began, and I do think that's a success. That none of the players did anything stupid, none of the teams did anything stupid, none of the owners did anything stupid, the league didn't do something stupid. So it does show that they're a professional organization and are here to stay.
yeah, I agree. And then another thing is they had 4 million viewers the first week, and then during the championship. So I think that's another thing. Like it wasn't just a couple 100,000; it was a couple million, and I think that's a solid turnout.
Yeah, I agree. That's definitely a good number for an organization that just started. I know technically they were there before, but this is basically their beginning.
Yeah, and we should probably maybe in the off season in the USFL. I'm learning a lot more about that USFL, what that was, and that's very interesting because Mike McCarthy was a staff member for one of the USFL teams. I can't remember which team it was, but I almost want to say it was the Chicago. Chicago team.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting seeing the names back then and where they are now. So that's all we got. Thank you for listening, and we appreciate all the follows. Make sure to check out our interviews that we've done. We've done a new one recently, and we appreciate it. And be on the lookout for more from Outsiders Opinions.